When are you dropping that Bogdanovic video you were talking about working on the other day? I mean, it's coming along. I'm not exactly in a rush. It is Bojan Bogdanovic. I mean, he's a good player, don't get me wrong, and he's been in some good form. But what? It's not like he's going to drop 50 or something. Like, there's no rush. I guess 48. I guess I was right. He didn't drop 50, did he? But he dropped 48. So congrats to you, Bojan. You couldn't have done it a day later. You couldn't have just waited till after I dropped the video, but you had to drop 48 today. But all credit to you. I guess it just shows that he's an important piece to this Jazz team. And with Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley having been sidelined recently, well, Bogdanovic has been the biggest player to step up. And he's gone from someone who was struggling earlier in the season, which was quite surprising given the fact pretty much everyone on the Jazz was having close to a career year. And Bogdanovic, coming off a career year last year, had taken a significant hit. He was averaging under 15 points a game. He was under 40% from three and just over 40% from the field. And that was through the first 47 games of the season. Since then, over the last 20 or so games, he's averaging 22 points a game on near 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. So it's safe to say, after having a little bit of a rough stretch, and I will give some kind of slack to him, apparently he did have a wrist injury, I'll put that out there, but after having a rough start to the season, he's gearing up right at the right time, and it's the reason why I think the Jazz could be even more dangerous than we thought before, because now all of a sudden, once you add Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley back into the mix, a team that was already the best in the NBA before those injuries now has a Bogdanovic that's playing the best basketball of his career. It's a pretty scary sight, so the Jazz are looking dangerous, and before I get into all of those things, if you could drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, that would be much appreciated. I make content like this close to every single day, and doing so, it helps out. And it also helps me out for the fact I was going to drop this video yesterday, and well, he drops 48, but who really cares? I think back to a little back and forth I had just a few months ago, whenever it was, about the Phoenix Suns and the Utah Jazz in a potential playoff series, and I'm not coming out here and saying I know who's going to win that series, because it's going to be a tight one if they were to play against each other. But the reasoning in which I saw quite a few people saying the Suns would come out on top was because of the fact they thought they had more shot creators. The Jazz are really reliant on Donovan Mitchell, and while I don't think everyone thinks the same, I think a lot of people have said similar things in terms of Donovan Mitchell is their offensive power, and pretty much if he gets closed out of the game, they don't have enough people that can create their own shot. And well, let's be honest, I completely disagree with that. If we just look at the sample size without Donovan Mitchell in 14 games this season, they have an offensive rating of 117.3. How good is that, you may ask? That's the best in the NBA. Yeah. So they've been pretty potent without Donovan Mitchell. And this isn't some kind of Donovan Mitchell smear campaign. I'm not trying to say he's not a good player. He's obviously a very good player, but to say they don't have enough creators or they can't create enough offense without Donovan Mitchell is ludicrous. It's just straight up ludicrous. And some of those games have been without Mike Conley as well, who's one of those guys that can create shots. And just talking about that right now in terms of the diversity I see in the scoring and potential offense from the Jazz, which is why I have so much hope for them in the playoffs, you look at Mitchell, who will probably be the top scorer in any series they play, I imagine, but even still, you look outside of him. You have Bogdanovic, who averaged 20 last year and is back to his best, as I've mentioned, and as I'll talk about. You have Mike Conley, who had a pretty down season last season, but in the playoffs, he averaged 20 and 5 on good shooting splits. Joe Ingles is having a career year. He can create his own shots. He's hitting pull-up threes. He can create offense for others. Rudy Gobert, although he's not a shot creator, he's going to get his own off offensive boards and lobs, and Jordan Clarkson can create his own shot off the bench as well. How many is that? That's 5. And Rudy Gobert, who has an offensive impact, even though he's not a shot creator, like how many more do you want? Like, I don't quite understand it. I think to a team that was quite similar last year in the fact people question, would they have enough outside of Jimmy Butler? Well, the Miami Heat had 3 different top scorers on average through the first 3 rounds of the playoffs. You got points out of Bam Adebayo, you got points out of Jimmy Butler, Goran Dragic, Tyler Hero, all of those guys. I could see a similar thing happening with Utah, except I think they've got a lot more potency than the Heat of last year. Whether they're going to be a better team is a different story, but just looking at the names and the players, potency-wise, this is a team with 5 guys that I could see giving 20 on any given night. Like, that is something that not many teams can say the same about. But getting back to Bogdanovic specifically and why I wanted to make this video kind of talking about him, obviously the Jazz as a whole, but Bogdanovic, and why I think his recent form is pretty pivotal. Well, obviously the Jazz were an elite team before he got started, and then Mitchell got injured, Conley's been injured, so we haven't really seen this iteration of Bogdanovic with this iteration of the Utah Jazz, so we don't exactly know their potential or their ceiling. But you just look at what they could do in the playoffs, and I think it's important to have someone like Bogdanovic, because obviously Mitchell's going to create for himself. You're going to have that Gobert little pick and roll thing that they did against Jokic last season. You're going to have Joe Ingles is going to create some shots, Jordan Clarkson, Mike Conley. But then you have Bogdanovic. He's someone that you now have that you know you can feed into the post if you've got a mismatch. It's going to keep the defense accountable. They're not going to be able to just chuck someone onto Bogdanovic and be like, they're not going to give him the ball. No, they're going to feed it to him if he's got someone that's a mismatch inside. On the outside, he's someone that could bail you out if you're not getting a good shot. He can create offense when Donovan Mitchell's off the floor. There's so many things that he's just going to help this team with all of a sudden now that he's in good form that otherwise they wouldn't have had. Like, they would have had no problems creating offense even with Bogdanovic averaging like 15 a game, evidenced by the fact they were still elite. But now all of a sudden you see that they've been elite even without Donovan Mitchell on the floor offensively, and a lot of that comes down to the fact Bogdanovic and Joe Ingles are the guys creating offense for themselves and for others, which is what the playoffs are about. They're about having adaptability and having guys that, say Mitchell's got an off night, say he can't score the ball, say Clarkson's got an off night, you've got Bogdanovic, he could give you 25, you've got Ingles, you've got Conley, you've got these guys. That's what the playoffs are about. It's about having different guys that can step up, and Bogdanovic is just proving to be a guy that is definitely going to step up in a playoff series if he continues playing like this. And then I've kind of alluded to him, but the other balding white guy that kind of looks like he's about 10 years older than he is, and well, doesn't really look like an NBA player, more like a local gym teacher, Joe Ingles. I mean, he's been playing anything but like a gym teacher, because he's basically Chris Paul with less opportunity and less usage rate. Fight me if you want, but Joe Ingles is the greatest point guard we've ever seen. Not quite, but just looking at his numbers, looking at him going from a small forward to a shooting guard to a point guard to a power forward to a small ball center, not the last one, but pretty much everything imaginable, to off the bench to on the starting lineup. He does everything right now. And recently, as he's been playing point guard, he's had 25 assists in the last 3 games and only 4 turnovers. Over 6 assists to a turnover. Like, he takes care of the ball. He can create his own shot and for others. This is a guy that's going to be coming off the bench. You've got someone who's been averaging 13 and 7 since Donovan Mitchell has gone down, and he's going to be coming off the bench with Derek Favors, who they didn't have last year. And that kind of speaks into another thing that I want to talk about with the Jazz in terms of why I'm higher on them than last year. You had Juwan Morgan and Tony Bradley coming off the bench. Now you've got Derek Favors. Like, there's a huge difference in that. And every other player has improved. Even George Niang, he was coming off the bench last year. He's a better player. Joe Ingles is having a career year. Mike Conley is better than last season. Donovan Mitchell, Bojan Bogdanovic. This version of him right now is better than last year's version. Royce O'Neal. Like, the list goes on and on. Every single player on the Jazz roster is better than last year. And that exact roster probably should have made it out of the first round if they didn't choke a 3-1 lead. Sorry, Jazz fans. And again, that's kind of another thing I want to talk about as well. Everyone talks about the Clippers. Oh, how are they going to cope with losing that 3-1 lead? They're going to come back furious. They're going to come back ready to fight. And that's cool. I'm sure they will. But Utah had the exact same thing happen to them. It's probably even more dramatic circumstances because Conley had a shot to win them the game. And you've seen how they've come out in the regular season. What about in the playoffs? They're going to be ready to go at it. So I see this team as a team that is as primed as anyone right now in the NBA to make a run. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley are people that need to get healthy. But this is a team that has been pretty much the best team in the NBA all season long. They've been good against teams above 500. They've been winning with or without Donovan Mitchell, with or without Mike Conley. They've been good defensively and very good offensively. They've got the defensive player of the year. Yes, in my opinion. In my opinion, Ben Simmons, cool. You can have your little campaign. Everyone is talking about Ben Simmons in terms of the media and stuff. And it kind of does frustrate me as someone who doesn't really care in terms of just blatantly not wanting someone else to win the award. Basically is what I'm trying to say. It's clear that they don't want Rudy Gobert to win the award this year, most of the people in the media, and that's why there's such a clear desire for Ben Simmons to win. Gobert is just still so impactful. You see players run to the rim and run away because Gobert's there. Sometimes it'll be a 2-on-1 and they still run the other way because Gobert's there protecting the paint. Like, he's a legitimate force inside. He's that good defensively, and I think he's playing better on the perimeter than he ever has before, in my opinion, at least from what I've seen. I don't know if the numbers back it up. I know the numbers are pretty promising in terms of him guarding pick and rolls and him guarding onto the perimeter, but from what I've seen, he looks like he's playing better defense on the perimeter than ever before. So you add that into the mix with his rim protection. They've got that kind of defensive player. They've got all these guys that can create shots for themselves, contrast to what some people might believe. And I mean, they've got fans as well. That's a big thing as well. Like, they've got damn near full capacity crowds, and Utah have pretty much the craziest fans in the NBA, I would suggest, in terms of, from what I hear just through my TV screen, they seem as loud as anyone in the NBA, and it's a pretty big atmosphere. So that's a big impact as well for a team that's going to have home court advantage in any single playoff series. These are just a lot of factors that go into why I think Utah are a team that is still very good and is still very dangerous, and are more dangerous with Bojan Bogdanovic. Sure, is there going to be some series where they might be outmatched? Maybe the Lakers are the one that comes to mind. The Lakers come to mind for literally every team because Anthony Davis and LeBron James, when healthy, are two of the best three players in the NBA, in my opinion. So what can you really do with that? Not much, evidenced by last year. But outside of that, I think they have a chance to beat any single team in the playoffs. And they still have a chance against the Lakers, don't get me wrong. But a healthy Lakers team are obviously a dangerous team. I think Utah would just have to create enough offense, and Rudy Gobert would have to scare pretty much everyone else outside of doing anything for them to win that series, which is possible. Right now, the Jazz, I'm liking what I'm seeing, particularly with the new form of Bogdanovic. And that's kind of why I wanted to make a video. Obviously, just in isolation, if you look at Bojan Bogdanovic and you're like, oh, he's improved form, that's not really a huge thing. But then you think, oh, Utah were the best team in the NBA while he was playing poorly by his standards, and to now he's playing probably better basketball than he ever has in his life. So piece it together and you think this team has gone up a notch. This team might be the best team in the NBA still, even though they're probably not getting respected like that. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the whole Utah Jazz and Bojan Bogdanovic. Had to drop 48 just before I was going to make a video. But anyways, he's going to drop 50 against the Rockets today if he even plays, if they don't rest players. Have a good day. I'll catch you next time. Bye.